Hello, everybody, and welcome to my second live with the very wonderful Andrew Lownie. Andrew, I couldn't believe the response to our live last week. It was just such a hit. People
Oh, I'm
loved
pleased.
seeing it.
Well, you're so
Yeah.
good. You bring the best out in everyone.
Oh, well, thank you. I think you had a large part to play, but thank you for the compliment. I wanted to kick off. I've actually got some slides this week, so we're getting very high tech now, but I'll just bring it up while we chat about it. This is the article from Roy Anika in the Sunday Times saying that the King is saying he doesn't want to see Andrew and Sarah at Christmas. Now, I just wanted, before I ask you your opinion, I want to tell you very quickly this irritated me. I felt like it was too little, too late. And I
Absolutely.
also felt like it was a bit lame, a bit mealy mouthed, a bit indirect. I hate all the friends tell. So, what's your impression of the whole thing?
No, exactly my feeling. In fact, I went on Times Radio on Saturday night to talk about this. I mean, I think it's, as
Oh,
you say, it's too little, too late, and it's pathetic. People are calling out for some sort of something to happen, and uh, this is meaningless too. I mean, at one point he was saying, "Oh, I can't prevent the family seeing him and all sorts of things," and then now he's banning him from Christmas. This isn't going to do the trick, I'm afraid. He needs to get a grip on the situation and get ahead of the narrative. I mean, William recognizes that, and he clearly doesn't. I understand that Clive Alderton, who's his private secretary, has been saying to be a bit firm. I think one of the problems well, several problems. Charles, I think, is a kind man. I think he gave an undertaking to his mother to make sure Andrew was okay. And I think he's just nervous that if he doesn't keep Andrew and Fergie on side, they may get up to all sorts of mischief
mm.
with revealing stories about the royal family. So he's kind of caught. But I think and also why announce this, as you say, through sources? Why not just quietly do it with Andrew and say you're not going to be welcome this Christmas?
It's just seems so. I'm wondering whether is King Charles sort of losing control of his court. There's a lot of leaking, a lot of briefing going on. I'm going to bring up another subject. It's actually about the whole Harry debacle next. But even in this case, it just seems so undisciplined and
Yes, it
so
is.
undirected. And yeah, and I think that could
There's
be
no
sort of half his problem.
there's no Iron Man holding keeping the act together like Christopher Guite used to do. And I
Mm.
think power is moving to William. I mean, he has been to call the shots. He's won the battle against Andrew, at least in the public arena. And I think people are talking about, in the way that we saw with the Queen and Charles sharing the monarchy in the last few years of her life, I think we're seeing power slipping from Charles to William. We're seeing exactly the same situation that the reigning monarch is sort of not really fit for purpose, I should say. And as you say, everyone is beginning to see that they're weak. Exactly what we've got with our prime minister at the moment. Everyone's briefing against him because he's lost control of his party and his government.
I think people can sense, they can smell blood, can't they? When someone's
Absolutely.
wounded and limping, they,
And
they
the
can smell
comments,
it.
the comments in under articles are getting more and more critical now of Charles and the monarchy in general. It used to be Andrew and Fergie and Harry and Meghan. Now it's much more widespread, the criticism. I mean, this is a seeping thing that he needs to deal with, and ruthlessness doesn't go amiss sometimes.
Yeah, I also got the impression from the way it was couched that it seemed really not permanent. It seemed like just lay low until the heat dies down. It was like, try not to be seen, enter through side entrances and all this sort of thing. And, you think surely he's learned his lesson. He's expended all his political capital now. And so surely he's not waiting, thinking that the heat will go out of this and then he's going to welcome them back at some point. Do you think he would be that silly?
Well, I mean, he has done it. I mean, after all, Fergie was banished for years under Prince Philip. They were kept at a sort of arm's length. And then for some bizarre reason, they were invited back to Sandringham, and there they are gurning away, and Fergie's back in her element. And then there he is kissing her hand at Ascot, and she is in the royal box at Wimbledon. And then even at the Duchess of Kent's funeral, they get an armed escort all the way from Windsor. What's that all about? That doesn't suggest someone who's on the periphery. She's wormed her way back in, and he seems so naive. He seems to have bought all her stories. So yeah, I think it's really sad. He's kind of lost the plot here.
I also felt very sorry for the Kent family, as I said in our last live. But even this article from Roy and Nika, I didn't think it went far enough, and it almost warranted a public apology. I know that would never happen, and that's naive of me, but it just feels like the Kent family will never get their mother's funeral back. And
Yep.
and she was such a dignified, wonderful woman who really achieved a lot and did a lot of good in the world.
Yep.
And now
Yeah,
this has
absolutely.
been, her funeral's been sullied, and I just think it's so wrong, because it will, her funeral will always be associated with these grubby, antics that we saw on the steps of
I
the
agree.
church.
I agree. Well, even actually Charles was laughing at times.
I
I don't
know.
think he comes out very
Yes.
well. It's a very interesting video that Tom
No.
Sykes has put up. The
Yes.
whole thing was a mess. Why
Yeah.
wasn't Andrew told to slip in the side if he couldn't actually realize, the need to do that
Yeah.
already? This family is got so many advisors. It's meant to be educated, and yet they behave in the most extraordinary way sometimes. Um, yeah, I
Yeah.
really feel, sorry for the monarchy in some ways, because it's kind of lost its way at the moment.
Yeah, yeah, I think so. This fundamental lack of discipline in the King's Court, I wanted to sort of bring it into play with the next thing that I'm bringing up, which is just a few samples of what's been going down. Now, everybody knows that I'm not a Harry fan, but I can still be, I think, decent. And I think that the leaks from the King's Court about the fact that, oh, he's misinterpreted a cup of tea and a slice of cake for the Treaty of Versailles, I just thought that was unnecessary. It was snipey. It was ugly. And then for the king to do the gaslighting of, oh, I'm saddened and perplexed, I can't work out, while Harry is hitting out. Now, Harry is a complete idiot for hitting out, because, I mean, talk about walking straight into a trap, as Tom Sykes pointed out. And genuinely, I don't really have a lot of sympathy. I don't see the point of Harry now. I don't see the point of him near the royal family. I only see the point of him privately with his father if they choose, but not in public. So, this lack of discipline, this sniping, do you think the king was aware of it? Or do you think it was people thinking they were helping and just creating more drama?
Yes, it could be advisors. He should be in control of his advisors. It's a return to the days of Mark Boland and the briefing against Diana and everything being played out in the papers.
Right.
But Charles isn't quite the kind person, perhaps, that maybe I was alluding to before. There is a lot of games playing goes on the whole time. It's a bit like the Kremlin, trying to work out the actions and who's up and who's down. So yeah, I agree. They're both fools. This should be a family matter dealt with behind closed doors, and if one is leaking, the other shouldn't be leaking. But these stories appear generally in papers who have very close relationships with the royal family, the Times and the Telegraph particularly. So there is something going on here. They're playing for public opinion, but actually all they're doing is actually causing greater criticisms, I would say, of the royal
Yeah.
family. What they want is to be able to silence.
Yes, and I noticed that this was even going back on William, who was off evidently grouse shooting at Balmoral the last weekend. So I don't think he was really playing a major part. I think he was more interested in being with his mates and having a good time. But this backlash went on William again. And I'm thinking the king, we're talking about political capital. He expended just about all of his meeting with Harry. So you've got, the public very unhappy about this. Then you've got the pile on William and the Wales family that was a consequence of that, which a lot of it was fueled by, the Sussex PR team. We know that. It seemed to come from their usual sources. Also, like I said, an undisciplined King's Court, possibly adding to the fuel. Then we have all the days of positive press about Harry, which he self-sabotaged. So the King expended all of this. Wouldn't you think he would stand by the decision and ensure that these leakings and briefings did not occur?
Yes, you would think so. He's in control of the situation. I mean, and he should be. But you know, he expended a lot of political capital trying to get Andrew out of Royal Lodge, and look where where that went. So you know, he keeps picking battles, and they all turn out to be the wrong battles. But yeah, he should be dignified above the fray, but he should be an iron fist running things behind the scenes. And one doesn't get the feeling that's happening. You know,
No.
it's like a teacher who can't discipline his class.
Yes, yeah, true. Open season, very much so. I wanted to get on to Fergie and the manifest that was released, quite recently with Andrew on it, and I've got a photo of that. But I just wanted to go back a little bit with the Fergie story, where one of her main excuses was that she was scared that Jeffrey Epstein was going to sue her, and her best friend Daphne Barak said, well, how could that happen? Because he'd already been convicted of the crime. So how could he sue her? It just doesn't make any sense.
No.
So I put up on Substack, obviously not worried about being sued, more worried about being revealed.
Absolutely. You know, I think Epstein was very unhappy with the way she behaved. I mean, he'd given her a lot of money. And she was, keen to stay in with him. So she was trying to ride two horses, but rather foolishly, not realizing that really wouldn't play well with Epstein. So she had to back off. But this is what the whole story of her life. What she says in public and how she behaves in private is very different.
Yeah.
So I mean, I think Epstein clearly was putting some pressure on her, but she could have easily just apologized quietly and said that it had been a mistake or whatever. But she couldn't really sing the fact that she was supporting all these women's charities and doing all these children's books, with any sort of genuine conviction, and have those sort of basically still be sucking up to him. But we do see this with the York family. They often try and launder their reputation through working with particular charities. There was a charity that Andrew had, actually, I didn't write about in the book, which was to help a trafficked woman in India supply goods and sell them in companies here. And it got a bit of publicity. It ran for a year, and then basically the whole thing was shut down. We have the anti-collective slavery of one of the daughters, making big play of that. Which again, I hear, people are investigating at the moment. So, I mean, it's all smoke and mirrors with them. You do question how genuine any of this stuff is when you begin to see what's lying behind it. I mean, Fergie used the charities often just to burnish her credentials as a great humanitarian. She just declares herself to be. She used it to do her social networking, and of course, she used it to help bolster her business career. And so one, realizes just how cynical she is. Funny enough, I got something today from someone who was a neighbor in Dummer, and she made big plays of her relationship with her grandmother. The person said she didn't visit her for 4 years and then made a big fuss at the funeral. So this is the sort of person we're dealing with, I'm afraid. The kooky dipsy person is very, very different behind the scenes. And I think people are finally waking up to that.
Very transactional. Very similar to Meghan, maybe, in that way. I can see parallels too between the sort of setup that maybe Harry and Meghan are trying to set up with the King, where their relationship with him and having proximity to him even a few times a year would result in paydays, would result in a lot more interest in them, and also their constant getting awards, and also there's one coming up in New York, and have humanitarian award evidently that they've paid for, and all this hiding behind charity to enhance their reputation. So it seems to be a Fergie 2.0 situation, and that would surely make the palace very wary because they've just gone through all this.
Absolutely. I mean, it is the same playbook, and they should realize it. And that's why, in some ways, the two problems are connected. But you're absolutely right. There are a lot of connections clearly between Meghan and Fergie, except Fergie's clearly done it a bit more successfully than Meghan. And actually between Harry and Andrew. I mean, these not very bright, rather petulant, entitled men who had structure in the armed forces but are lost once they're out of it. And are very much, puppets of their wives. So, always, this is what's so fascinating about the royal family. The history repeats itself time and time again, and they never seem to learn any of the lessons.
No. Yeah, that's it. They don't seem to. I've got the manifest here, which is Prince Andrew was, you would know all about this. You would have seen all this before, I know. So it's a manifest from New Jersey to Palm Beach on Jeffrey Epstein's private jet in May 2000. Now, would you like to add anything about this? Because I'm sure you know a lot more about this than I do.
Well, I mean, we know the names of the other people on this. I think it's
Oh,
Kelly
sorry, I
Spam
took it
and
away. So I've got them here though,
okay, I think
because
it's Kelly
it's
Spam and
actually
Bunny.
redacted. It was redacted on that
It
particular
was redacted
manifest.
here, but it has
Yeah,
appeared in public. That's what's so
I've
ridiculous
got
about
them
these
though.
reductions.
Yeah, yeah. Emmy
Have you got the
Taylor.
names?
Yeah, I've got the
Emmy
names.
Taylor, that's right,
Emmy
it's Emmy Taylor.
Taylor. And also, there was other well-known figures, including Prince Andrew and the supermodel Naomi Campbell, but that wasn't on that
Yeah.
particular flight. But on that flight, Ghislaine Maxwell's assistant, Emmy Taylor, was identified, like you said, in publicly available documents, and now it's redacted.
Yes, I
Why
know
would
that's
that
what's so
be?
ridiculous. Well, because this is always what happens. There's no consistency about what they do. I mean, they presumably found they would say it was data protection or something. Emmy Taylor now lives in Oxford. She's not spoken to anyone. I mean, she's one of the key players in this whole story. I mean, what I would say about 2000 is it's a year after we have the first recorded travel of Andrew on the Epstein flights, which was February 1999, though clearly, according to Alistair Watson, they'd met in the early 1990s. So there's this huge gap where we don't know what was going on in their relationship. We haven't got material from flight logs. But 2000 was one of the heights of the relationship with Epstein. He saw him continually. He was going out with Ghislaine Maxwell at the time. And there are lots of flights to the island, to Palm Beach, and a lot of time spent socializing in New York, and indeed trips to the ranch. And again, it's not clear whether he went to the ranch with Melanie Walker, and also whether he went to the island with someone called Gwendolyn Beck, who then tried to actually run in American politics. She's the famous picture with Jeffrey Epstein, Melania, and Andrew at Mar-a-Lago. Yeah, this is one of the key moments, and I think what's also emerging is that Andrew was paying for massages, $200 a time, which is the going rate. All this stuff which he's denied is all now beginning to emerge. So every time he says something new shows that actually what he said is a complete travesty about the truth. And so we're really waiting for both of them to actually start telling the truth to us. I think we're kind of owed that. They've never comment on anything. It's they think that's helped them, and maybe it has, because maybe actually telling the truth would even be more damaging than the stuff the snippets we're getting.
I saw a report where they said that the manifest between 2006 and 2015 have disappeared. They're just not anywhere. And it does make me wonder whether that's sort of coinciding with Andrew's job as special representative of trade and investment. I mean, have you seen anything between 2006 and 2015 that they're now saying doesn't exist? Have you actually seen anything?
Well, I mean, we in terms of looking at the papers of his time as a trade envoy, so the Foreign Office papers and the Department of Trade papers, originally they said they had nothing before 2008. Then they seemed to mysteriously found them. But when I've been asking for any of these papers, nothing can be produced. They've not produced one single bit of paper, really, or the odd bit of paper with redactions on it about his trips over 10 years, which must amount to literally hundreds of thousands of pages of paper. I know, talking to someone in the Department of Trade, that all links to him have been excised from the computer there. And I think we're not going to get logs anymore. The pilots are not talking. I've tried them. I've tried, for example, Adam Perry there. All the people who've been on the flights I contacted to see if they would talk, and no one is talking. So there's a huge operation to sort of launder this stuff up. So it's happening in the States, with clearly the Epstein files being destroyed at the Department of Justice and at the FBI, but it's actually happening in Britain as well, and I suspect elsewhere. There are some interesting bits of material arriving from Paris, which I know will be appearing in the papers in the next few weeks. So stay tuned for that. But there is a big operation going on here. People do not want this story coming out. So all we can rely on now is oral testimony from people like the witnesses, and actually Virginia Giuffre's book, which I've got high hopes will also begin to open up a can of worms.
I was going to ask you about Virginia Giuffre's book and ask you if you had any inside knowledge of what might be in that, and if you did, would you admit it on this live anyway? But do you?
I always tell you everything. No, I don't.
Sure. I actually emailed Andrew the other day and I said, you are king of the diplomatic brush off, because he's very, very circumspect. You're not a gossip, are you, Andrew? You're very careful, and you back everything up with facts, and that's what I admire about you, actually. I try to entice him into gossiping, but he will never gossip with me.
I've given you a few little nuggets. I have given you a few nuggets here of things.
Talking about gossip, this is a bit of a gossipy thing I noticed just before I came on. It was in Hello Magazine, and it was Camilla at the Braemar Literary Festival, and she was with Tom Parker Bowles, which is not that unusual, it's her son, but also Giles Corran, who was the one that caused all the kerfuffle about, there was accusations of an affair with Rose, which we've got to be careful, because Rose Hanbury justifiably has threatened to sue anyone that brings those rumours up again. And we will say here that they are categorically untrue, Rose. Do not sue us.
Yes.
But it's interesting. Yeah, but Giles Corran, what would Camilla be doing at a literary festival with him? Surely she would realise what that would bring up for people, and the suspicion and the conspiracy theories that, somehow she's plotting against William in some way. It was a stupid move.
It's weird. I think they clearly haven't made the connection, or forgotten the connection, or maybe they have remembered the connection and they're doing a bit of mischief. Who knows? The Braemar Festival is run largely by the hotel up there, but you would think, but she is very much the patron. You would think they would run the guests, before her, first of all. I thought secretly I might suggest myself for it, but I didn't think I would get very far.
I was going to ask you if you'd been to that one.
I thought they might take something on John Buchan, who a Scottish writer. But it is interesting who's there. I mean, there are a lot of the usual suspects, the kind of crowd who hang around the royals and suck up to them, and the royals suck up to them. But that was an interesting choice.
Because she was with him. Like, it wasn't just he happened to be there. She was with him and her son. So that's very, very strange. I thought this was quite amusing. I've got something else to show you here. And it was an actress that, prior to the King making his announcement, refused to promote her role in the ITV 4-part series about Fergie. She's not going to promote the series. She's going to donate her salary, good on her, to victims of sexual abuse. I mean, I think it's a great stand, really. It's Natalie Dormer. So she made a move, and I think it was moves like that, brave moves, that probably put the pressure on the King to get his friends to talk to Roy Anika. But I just thought I would give her a shout out, because
I think it's good. Well, I mean, it will be interesting to see that, because Jane Andrews, who the program's about, who worked for Fergie as her personal assistant for I think about 8 years, and then murdered her boyfriend. And it was she was almost a stalker of Fergie. I mean, she kind of dressed the same way. She got the same sort of airs. She actually slept with some of the same men.
Ooh.
And it'll just be interesting how that, if anything more comes out on that story, and how they're going to deal with it. I mean, I think people have been trying to find Jane Andrews for years now, and there have been odd photographs of her, but no one's actually managed to get her to talk, unfortunately, because I think she knows a lot of the
Another
secret.
mystery. Another mystery. We
Yeah.
already talked about Virginia Giuffre's book, but I just wanted to say what her family said. They praised the commendable decisions by charities to drop the Duchess as a patron and called on all US charities to follow suit. That's what I'm not aware of. Has there been much of a backlash, a serious backlash against Fergie in the USA yet?
Well, it's a good question. One of the things I wanted to investigate was just how many charities she was still involved with, both passively and actively. And I haven't been able to find out by just yet been able to find out. But that's a good point. If of all people are falling by the wayside as well, I think there must be reputational damage in the States as well. And it'll be interesting. I mean, if actually her children's book ever gets published, it was slated to come out, I think, next month. In fact, published by my own publishers. It was one of the reasons the American publisher, Collins, wouldn't take my book, that they were doing her book. So it'll be interesting to see what happens if they do go ahead with her book now. I mean, I'm sure she'll be on the sort of trail of all the talk shows at some point, putting her side of the story. And I'm afraid people will be lapping it up.
I don't
So
think it'll be very successful. I really think that she's had her, last life. I really don't think anyone will buy it again. Do you really?
I never say never. I say with her, it's amazing. Ever thought she was out, out of the royal family's sort of ambit with Prince Philip, and then back she comes, after 2010, the News of the World sting. I mean, who could come back from something like that? You're filmed selling access to your husband. She manages to come back. So it's extraordinary how naive people are, and how wily she is. No, well, we'll see. I put money on Harry coming back as more likely than her. Sorry,
No,
sorry, both of them coming back.
I don't think that's what I meant at the start of the show. And this isn't just me being horrible and bitchy. It's just really a fact that what is the point of Harry in relation to the royal family? I just don't see. He's never going to be back as a working royal, so he's only going to be back as a periphery sort of grifter at the most, and it's just going to upset the heir to be. So I don't really see the point. Couldn't they give him enough money, like a pre-inheritance, and wouldn't he just be just as happy surfing?
Well, I mean, I think he did get some money. I think there was some money on a 40th birthday, I think, from Diana or something. I mean, they have all these trust funds that work. But you're right. I mean, I think they either, you're either in or you're out, and you can't be half in and half out. And maybe they need to rethink. I mean, I think they are rethinking the model. It just needs the direct line of succession. It's a simplified European-style monarchy. I think that's what people would accept, with a little bit of pomp every so often, and get rid of all the hangers-on. And I think everyone just needs to lower their expectations. We don't need all these royals opening hospitals and things. And I think the research is showing they don't necessarily add much to charities' fundraising activities, unless it's one of the very popular royal like Catherine. So I think there needs to be a fundamental rethink of how monarchy works, rather than just the same Tardal model and trying to fit people into it. I think people do quite like sometimes when they all appear on the balcony, but those can be for the family occasions. We can still see them go to church at Sandringham, the good guys, but there does need to be a fundamental rethink, I think.
And trooping the colour, of course, but other than that, it probably would be okay just to leave it. I wanted to finish up with, you made a comment last week on how the palace is very close to the Telegraph, and I did a piece over the last week where the interview you did with the Daily Tea podcast with Camilla Tominey, and I think it's Tim Stanley. And a lot of people, the comments under that was absolutely hilarious, because people were saying, thank goodness Andrew Lownie stood his ground. Thank goodness that he didn't let them get away with it, because they were trying to gloss over the whole thing, which was just, so blatant and ridiculous. But do you think that that is really concerning? Because I heard you say in another podcast that they even reviewed your book before they'd read it and canned it. Some
Yeah.
reviewer did.
Yes, it does. It was canned. It was reviewed on the day the book was released, and was posted, shall we say? So it couldn't even have arrived. So they'd reviewed it on the strength of the serial, or could only have done that. But yes, I mean, I think there are still plenty of publications that haven't covered the book. A lot of journalists are not touching it. I mean, Piers Morgan, for example, great friend of Fergie, has done stuff on Epstein, but there's been nothing on Fergie's scandals. So we've just got to accept that there are all these relationships, and that's the world we live in. But yeah, I mean, the Telegraph, the Times get a lot of stuff fed to them. And though, of course, journalists will deny it and say they've got all these wonderful scoops, there is very obvious channels of the way things are done. I think what was interesting is I spoke to the Foreign Press Association last week, and I mean, they feel very much outside the magic circle and are rather irritated by it. And so, in fact, I think we're going to find more coming from the foreign press, particularly from social media, from commentators like you and Tom Sykes, who are sort of not quite in the circle. And that's good. I mean, that gives us a much more pluralistic press and attitudes, and people like you who are questioning the narrative. But I think, unfortunately, they haven't got wise to the fact that they need to up their game a bit. They're still playing with the old rules.
Well, I think that's journalism, isn't it? I mean, if you can present both sides and let the audience decide for themselves just by presenting the facts. But if you're going to do opinion, well, make it very clear that you're doing opinion. I think increasingly Royal Rota's actually rolling out opinion rather than, just factual coverage. I wanted to ask you about Jacob Rees-Mogg on GB News. This really interests me because it was, I mean, many know now that it was obviously quite a silly attack. He didn't let you speak at all. He picked ridiculous minor things out of the book to sort of double down on and get all upset about and didn't address any serious aspect of anything that you actually wrote, which was very telling. Do you think that he, got off air and hopped off straight off to Royal Lodge for a little post-show cocktail or something?
Well, I mean, I think it is, and you've raised this. I mean, are there connections between Rees-Mogg and the royal family? I mean, he's clearly sucking up to them. He's got his knighthood. I don't know what else he wants. Yeah, I think I think what often happens is these people sort of try and do these things in order to sort of win some favor, and whether it's noticed by the royal family or not, who knows? I mean, funny enough, GB News asked if I would go back on the other day to comment on Fergie, which I said, politely said thanks, but no thanks. But
you sure it was polite?
well, not to my wife, it wasn't. So I was tempted to sort of go back and say some things, but I think there are all these people who just pop up in the hope of currying favor. I'm not but I think you have raised some very interesting questions about the networks and how they operate together. I think Jacob Rees-Mogg may not quite have been at school with William. I think he's probably slightly older, but you forget about all these connections and how they operate. And I'm struck. I went to a lunch on Friday, which was full of retired army officers, naval officers. Actually picked up some interesting stuff on Andrew. But you do see, and they had the Commissioner of Police there. But you kind of see how these networks operate, how there's privileged information shared, how that people who work together come together and can operate together. And I think. So there are all these hidden networks. It's very difficult to work out how they operate. But we don't have it quite as a sort of dispassionate, I suppose, I say, media as people expect.
Yes, it's very hard to work out who the villains are at the moment. I've got a few comments from our live last week, which we will finish off with. These were top sort of upvoted comments, so I thought we'd just give them a bit of a look. I do feel bad for Prince William, who will be left with a lot of problems to deal with. Do you agree with that, or do you think they're looking like they might be cleared up before he ascends to the throne?
Well, I think it depends when he ascends to the throne. If it's very soon and Charles hasn't cleared up the problems, then clearly he's going to have to deal with them. But I'm hoping that it will be, a little time, and that some of these problems will have resolved themselves or been addressed. I think they often rely on the passage of time. I mean, if Andrew can be persuaded to do the right thing and leave Royal Lodge, and maybe go off to Abu Dhabi and keep out of the way, and Fergie disappears to Miami or wherever she's going to go, then clearly a lot of the problems will disappear. And I think it's sad because in some ways we had a very successful week of the monarchy. We saw the soft power of the monarchy operating with Trump. We saw how effective Catherine can be. Great work going up to support the victims at Southport, which was one of the tragedies here of 3 young girls being killed. So all the good things get overshadowed by all this sort of ridiculous sort of internal family squabbling, and the main message isn't getting out. So I think if they address those 2 problems, Harry and Andrew, quickly, then I think they can be onto fair wind and can go ahead with a lot of popular support.
Smooth sailing. That would be very good. Nancy DVI. I noticed Anne stayed away from Andrew at the funeral, at the Kent funeral. I also noticed that Anne was one of the very few members of the royal family and Sir Tim Lawrence that was respectful and normal and paid attention to the Kent family. What's your inside track on her attitude towards Andrew?
Well, they've never been close. I mean, they clearly have very different views of the way to behave. I mean, she's absolutely public service. And I mean, people really admire her for I think she must be one of the most popular. So I can't think she's happy about Andrew. I don't think there's much in common between them. I mean, apart from the age gap, their interests are very, very different, and the characters are different. So, we've got to remember that the royal family hardly have any contact with each other except at places like Sandringham and Balmoral at Christmas, and in the summer. So, there isn't a great opportunity for them to meet. She was away at boarding school when he was growing up. So I think it's probably quite a distant relationship, and she can see the reputational damage.
Must be quite heartbreaking for her, for someone that's put in so much hard work and so much duty, just to see it sullied like that. Final question, Tracy Burton. I'm still trying to figure out how Sarah Ferguson managed to ingratiate herself with Lisa Marie Presley so much that she spoke at Lisa Marie's funeral. Have you got any inside goss on all that?
Yes. Well, I think the link came through Oprah, and she used to go and stay with Lisa Marie. I mean, she was also friendly with her mother. But Fergie loves hanging out with showbiz people, stars, and in fact that was one of the problems. Sometimes when she went on trips, the diplomats, I've seen correspondence from diplomats saying, she's come here to do this and she wants to go and do that, and she spends a lot of time in LA as well as New York. So she loves collecting celebrities. So I'm afraid she just ingratiated herself with Presley, and of course, they probably felt that she was an important person to come and talk, but all these things are very superficial relationships.
Yeah, for sure. I better pay one bit of attention to the chat because they've been so patient. We got a tip, Andrew, from Koala Blues. Thank you very much, Koala Blues. I'll have to take you out for a drink.
That would be great. Look forward to that.
Renee Hollis. When King Charles dies, Meghan will go to the funeral with the children to take all the attention. I'll just show this up on the screen. So where is it? There it is. Okay, so the goal would be to have the newspapers with photos of Archie and Lily as a focus. Do you agree? Do you think she'll be at the funeral, and do you think she'll bring the children?
Who knows? I mean, it just depends on timing. These people, as we saw with Andrew and Fergie at the Kent's funeral, they have no shame, and they see this as opportunities for a bit of grandstanding. So I wouldn't put it past her. That could be an opportunity for her to do something. But who knows? You can't really ban people from funerals. I mean, if they can just kind of just turn up. So it just depends what the relationship, I suppose, is at that stage. If somehow everyone's made peace and they've gone quietly into their exile in California.
We can live in hope. We can live in hope.
But it'd
Well,
be
thank
ironic.
you.
He brings the children to the funeral, and he hasn't actually seen them
Yes.
himself.
Yeah, I know, a bit late. Never mind. Well, thank you so much for joining me again. And I'm sure there will be more that will unfold over the next week. And I'll get you back on and we'll discuss it, because there is just endless. I mean, you can't say that royal news is dull at the moment, can you?
No, it's fantastic. This is sort of, I think there was a poll done the other day, and it's in terms of people's in Britain's interests, the royal family is top. Seems to be ahead of fishing and golf and anything else. So, it is extraordinary. And I mean, every day there's something in the papers. But as you say, they're providing the material. I mean, certainly there's not apathy towards the royal family at the moment, which was one worry at one point.
Right. Yes, far from that. Well, thank you so much. We'll say goodbye to everybody. Thank you so much for joining me. We will leave the chat up on the replay so everyone can see what you're saying, and I will be reading it with interest later as well. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye, everyone. Bye.